Coming up next on Jersey Matters, we go inside the laboratories where they are currently testing the water in New Jersey schools for lead. And some of the schools haven't had the water tested yet, even though it's required by law. Also, it is one of the most infamous disasters in world history, and it happened right here in New Jersey. We remember the Hindenburg. Those stories and much more because Jersey Matters. Welcome to Jersey Matters. We come to you once again from the Aqua laboratories in Fairfield, New Jersey, the preeminent water testing facility in New Jersey. We were here a year ago, a little over a year ago, right after the crisis with water in Flint, Michigan, and when they had to close several of the schools in the Newark School District because of lead in the water. What's happened since then? Well, for one thing, there has been a state law requiring all public school districts in New Jersey to test their water. How's that going? Well, we asked the CEO and president of Aqua Laboratories. And we're now joined by Robert Barrett, the CEO and president of Aqua Laboratories. And let's start with the news of the day, and that is that we're approaching a deadline for the schools to get lead testing done. So you must be busy.
We're busy. We're continually testing other schools, but I think there's probably schools that are waiting also for the summer for the kids to get out of school, because they have to let the water sit in the pipes for 8 hours, and that's difficult while the children are in school. So I think it's going to really get crazy in the next couple of months.
Well, let's hope so, because I'll tell you what we did. There's over 500 school districts in New Jersey, and we contacted each and every one of them, the superintendents of all the school districts, and asked if you had your schools tested yet for lead. We received responses from 120 of them.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't mean that the other schools haven't done the testing, but it certainly makes you suspicious that they haven't done it yet. Are you concerned that many of the schools have not done it?
Well, it's a massive project. You've got to have there's so many activities after school, whether it be football practice or baseball practice, and they've got to let that water sit for 8 hours, okay? So sometimes it's difficult. And I think that I think they all know that they have to do it. There's been enough seminars to explain how to do it. And I hope they comply, because it's critical.
High levels of lead in water can cause brain problems, central nervous system problems, growth problems, problems with the blood. You would think that a school wouldn't want to wait. You would think they wouldn't even have to be forced to by the state to get testing done.
You're 100% correct, Larry. I mean, but we're going to talk later, I think, a little bit about other facilities that need to be tested. We're starting to notice here that this is now triggered other facilities not required by law to start testing. And I can go into those facilities.
Well, let's get into that first, and let me just set it up by saying that in 1986 there was a law passed by the federal government that you couldn't use lead soldering pipes because it caused water to get into the drinking water, and that caused all the problems we just talked about.
It leached into the water.
So if you have a building built before 1986, there is a possibility it still has that lead soldering in the pipes. So there is a possibility of that, and that you should at the very least test for that. It's being required by the state for schools. There is no requirement for private buildings that may have been built before then, or other public buildings. And the question is, should there be?
Well, there's no question about it. What about private universities? What about universities in the state of New Jersey that were built 200 years ago? They're starting. That's what I'm saying. There's some positive that's coming out of this as well.
When you say they're starting, you've been contacted.
Yes, we have. We're starting a project for a major university that's got buildings that are close to 200 years old.
And so there was no requirement for them to do this. They just did it because it's the right thing to do.
I think so. But I hope that the State University of New Jersey follows the requirements of the schools of New Jersey and starts to test. I don't know if they have or not. They haven't used APL.
I would hope not only that the universities would do that, but if somebody was renting apartments in an apartment building that was built before 1986, that they would do so because they were concerned about their residents. But I guess the point is, and I'll get back to the original question, I guess the point is, shouldn't they be required to do that?
Well, that's, I'm not a legislator.
No, I know you're not, but the state has already said that it's important enough to make the schools do it.
I understand that.
Public schools, not parochial schools.
I will say one thing, that there have been major media news sources, news organizations that have been here recently that are starting to consider doing stories on some of the buildings in Lower Manhattan that are 300 years old, that have no requirements to be tested for water, and their landlords surely don't want to test for water, okay? Who knows what they'll find, okay?
No, you raise a good point. It's not just New Jersey, it's New York, it's Boston, it's Connecticut.
It's all over.
You service 13 states, right?
Correct.
You came up here for Florida just for this interview.
I sure did.
You have an office in Florida.
I sure did.
And you came up because it's that important.
Well, it's important. The safety of our children are always important, but it's not only the children, as you said, it's the hospitals. We're doing hospitals now for lead testing. They were built 100 years ago, the initial hospital. Yes, it's expanded over the last 5 or 20 years, okay? Added new buildings. But the basic hospital structure was built maybe 80 or 90 years ago. They're starting to test. So I think we're seeing some positive out of the initial bill. Let's hope that it keeps going and gets extended to other aspects, whether it be in housing, whether it be in nursing homes, whether it be in universities. It's all the lead that was used, the lead solder that was used to put these pipes together leaches into the water. And overnight, if you don't let that water run before you use it, you are going to have the chances of having lead in your water are high.
And that brings up another point. You talking about having the water run brings up yet another point, in that the testing has to be done properly.
Correct.
And now that there is this frenzy that has been created about lead in the water after Flint and after Newark, which I want to talk to you about in a second, it seems like there's laboratories springing up everywhere to get in on the money.
Well, we're concerned about that, okay? The requirements to become a certified lab for lead are not that rigorous, okay? We're starting to hear of mom and pop places showing up in the basement of a building that's now a lead testing water facility, okay? We've been here for 35 years. We do 50% of, are involved in 50% of all the drinking water that's consumed in the state of New Jersey. Our chemists are highly trained. Our equipment the machines we use are $180,000 a piece. It's important to select the right laboratory. If you're going to use a lab, make sure you're using one that really knows what they're doing.
New York spent, what, $13 million to do some testing in their schools, and they have to redo them, right? Because the tests weren't done right.
New York decided to tell their superintendents to run the water overnight, which is totally contrary to what you're supposed to do, and then come in and test, okay? But it's got to be where they shut the school down. If they're going to do it in the morning, the school shuts down at 10 o'clock at night, locked down, no one uses anything, no one flushes a toilet. We bring our crew in at 6 a.m. and we start sampling, and we're there all day until the job is done.
You did the testing in the Newark school system. They had to shut down the schools. You've done testing since then. Are they okay?
The Newark school system, I think, is complete. We did a lot of samples, thousands and thousands of samples throughout Newark. We've done them for other major, large infrastructure school systems, the older school systems. And I think most of those big cities have been completed, okay? But the littler towns, we're still doing them every day, you know?
But so far, so good?
I think that they have hits, and they've got to not use those bubblers or fountains or sources until they fix the infrastructure. That's the other problem, Larry. They've got to find the money to fix these problems.
Let's talk more about that in a minute. We're going to move over to another lab. You're going to show me some of the samples, and we'll talk about what people can do in their own hometowns if they want to get the schools tested, or they want to pressure the schools to get tested, or they're in a building that is before 1986. We'll go to the other lab in just a minute when we continue our conversation with Robert Barrett, CEO of Aqua Protech Laboratories, in a minute.